When you first walk into the Northwoods, you see some really tall white pine trees. So these are the really tall ones. They have kind of long needles. I call them sort of the fluffier pine trees, right? They look sort of soft, and the needles are long and soft. You tend to see those in particular areas. You might look around the woods and wonder, well, why do we see most of the white pine trees, in this location and not other locations? So the very basic question that might follow from your observation is, are they the same species? They look different. Are they the same species? If not, why? We have these big trees above us, and they'll be dropping seeds of whatever sort. So you might expect that those same trees should be growing up from the forest floor. Sometimes that's the case, but a lot of times we have succession in a forest. So trees that can colonize a disturbed site relatively early need a lot of sun, and they're really good at growing in sun, and then they grow up, and then their seedlings are actually now growing in a different environment, and they're not actually that well suited to it. So when you have different stages of forest succession, you can have one type of tree that's really common as what we call the canopy trees, these large tall trees that we see around here. And then you can have sometimes, depending on the state of succession, different species of trees in the understory. So the understory would be like these lower saplings that we can see. And that's because now when you look up, it's a more closed canopy. So there's a lot more shade. There's some documentation that when Europeans first reached the eastern seaboard, the forests looked very different, and one of the explanations that I've read for that is actually that there was burning, so Native Americans burned to reduce underbrush to make it easier to hunt. If you want to say an area is intact or wild or untouched, what's your reference point? And for me, and this is more my personal opinion, I think it's getting harder and harder to say definitively, this is a wild habitat. This is completely untouched. Because how far back do you go? Do you go back to, are you talking about pre-European colonization? Are you talking about pre-human? Well, the forests look very different, if you're gonna go back that far. I think it is actually it's a human construct, the idea of wilderness. I think it's a very interesting and very valuable and important construct. But, I think it's also possible as an ecologist to look at this forest and say, well, yeah, there are a lot of invasive species, but there are a lot of native species as well. And if you're thinking about questions of how do different species interact, why do species persist, how do species evolve, all of those things are going on here, regardless of what state the forest is in.